From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., Call on Congress. The program discussing national issues that affect Oklahoma. Your host, U.S. Representative Tom Cole.
Thank you for joining me today for another edition of Cole on Congress. Today we're privileged to have with us as our special guest from the land of enchantment, New Mexico, Congressman Steve Pearce. Serving his third term in the House of Representatives, Congressman Pearce is a good friend and a well-respected colleague of mine. Steve currently sits on the House Natural Resources Committee and on the Financial Services Committee, and he serves as an assistant whip for the House Republican leadership. Congressman Pearce is a decorated war veteran who served as an Air Force pilot during the Vietnam conflict. He has firsthand military experience and expertise that has provided him with a great depth of knowledge and understanding of the conflict situations we face around the world. Both Steve and I have visited Iraq a number of times since we entered Congress, but he's here to provide us with the most up-to-date perspective since he's literally just returned from the front lines in Iraq a few short weeks ago. Congressman, really great to have you here. I'd be remiss not to add you also got an energy background, which in Oklahoma is a nice thing to have as well. So
we, in southeast New Mexico, we know oil and gas about like you do.
So we appreciate that. But tell me, again, you have been several times. Obviously, you have a military background of your own. You've just come back. What did you see when you were in Iraq, and what kind of impressions did you have about the situation on the ground?
Tom, I went first in October of 2003, so this was my fourth trip. This is the first time that we drove out into Baghdad proper, out away from the international or the green zone. So that was one sign of stability that I have not seen since 2003. Also, it was my first time out of 4 trips to actually spend the night in Baghdad. Most of the time we go out to Kuwait, spend the night there, and come back in. We were scheduled to go up north in Kirkuk, which would have been the first since 2003. That, again, would indicate stability up in that northern region that we haven't seen. And dust storms canceled us out on that, but we did get the clearance from State Department to go up there.
So, obviously, just because of physical movement, at least some signs of improvement in that regard.
Absolutely, and as we talk to the troops, as we talk to the Iraqis, we feel that there are cautious signs of optimism. I always tell my constituents, please be very careful getting too optimistic. This is going to be a 5, 10, 20-year problem. It's not something that's going to finish overnight. We are still in Korea. We fought that war in the 50s. We're still in Germany and Japan, and we fought that war in the 40s. That's the way it's going to be here, though that region is very unstable.
What about, who did you meet with specifically, first on the American side and then on the Iraqi side?
In the American side, the highest level that we met with was the general who's in command of the 1st Cavalry Division, and he is General Field. He said his task basically is to lower the sectarian violence and get control of Baghdad.
Is this Joe Field?
Yes.
Yeah, I met him on an earlier trip myself when he was actually helping, do one of the really tough jobs, which is create an Iraqi police force, a challenge that continues. Right. He's quite a remarkable soldier.
He is. We were, of course, General Petraeus was here in Congress the day I got back, and so he had already left to come here. We met with our embassy staff one of the first times that we've been into the embassy in Baghdad. We went out to one of the JSS, Joint Security Stations. That's where the Iraqis are beginning to displace the Americans. It was before the Americans at the top of the pyramid and the Iraqis underneath. Now then, in the areas where the Iraqi general is competent, we're actually transitioning that control. Went out to one of the JSSs out in the middle of Baghdad, drove down Haifa Street, which at one point was a safe haven for the terrorists. So just that movement, we could see Iraqis moving up and down, shops beginning to open back up. The Iraqis told us that the shops are staying open till later at night. That is, they have more goods to sell, but also bad things happen later in the evening, and they feel comfortable just keeping their shop open. So just tentative signs of cautious optimism all the way across the board.
What kind of exposure did you have to Iraqi forces, and what's the opinion, both our own and whatever you could surmise of their abilities and determination to, continue the fight and be successful.
If we were to look at it as a full campus, you would see spottiness, that some of the Iraqi divisions are ready to take responsibility and some aren't. It almost always is a reflection on the commanding general. So if they've got a strong commander, then there's chances that their personal discipline, their personal motivation to fight is going to be higher. And so we can't declare every part of Iraq ready to transition, but there are many areas. I think 7 out of maybe 90 of the military units that are under Iraqi control are ready to take full logistical responsibility, full command responsibility. So it's not great, but it also is much better than what it has been in the past. Also, we visited with the people at the theater hospital in Balad. That's where all of the people who are injured come to, and they showed us the statistics that the American casualties are declining slightly. The Iraqi casualties are increasing slightly, which again confirms the fact that we're transitioning to where the Iraqis are coming out from second place and moving up to the front lines of the combat, and our people are taking a secondary role. And so just you get a lot of indicators that things are transitioning somewhat slower than what a lot of us would like, but they're still transitioning.
What about the Iraqi political leadership? You probably had some interaction while you were there with politicians, government officials, what have you. Who'd you meet with, and what kind of impressions do you have?
Actually, this trip we did not meet with many of the politicians. We lost a day because of dust storms. We lost some of those meetings. But on my last trip in February, we met all the way up with the number 3 guy. And again, we had very frank discussions about the rules of engagement, the ability for Iraqis to go into the mosques that are harboring terrorists, where they're harboring arms. And the Iraqi leadership, political leadership, was very, very affirmative that they have and will continue with the rules of engagement that allow our soldiers to do their job, but also allow their soldiers to go into these mosques and disrupt the terrorists who are taking safe haven there.
Now, you mentioned you actually got back the day that General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker were delivering their testimony before a joint committee of the House Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee. I serve on the joint or on the House Armed Services Committee, so I had the privilege of listening to that, which was a very compelling testimony. But I'd like to get, in my view, I'd like to get your view insofar as you were able to follow it or what you've read about it. Where would you agree or disagree with General Petraeus or Crocker? What's your overall assessment of their recommendations?
I came and listened to the entire testimony. Again, we got back that morning, and by 9:30, I think I was over in the Armed Services Committee.
I want to interrupt everybody here because people should know what that meant for you to get off that airplane after I've been to Iraq 6 times, and those are grueling days. They're long days. They start early, they stay late. It is nice to be able to spend the night in Baghdad. I've been able to do that the last couple times as well, so you don't have that last hour and a half flight out and back the next morning, but it's still very long and very physically challenged. And to get on the plane, fly back here, get cleaned up, because I bet you had to do that.
We did.
And then get down there for a full day of hearing is quite a feat of physical endurance and real commitment to duty. So I want our listeners to recognize what a big deal that is.
It's about 16 hours to get back here, as you know, in the airplane. The way that I disagreed or agreed with General Petraeus is his reflection on the troops. He said that this may be the best trained military we've ever had in our history. I believe that to be true. I was in Vietnam, and frankly, we suffered in our military at that point because we had people who had been drafted along with volunteers. This is an all-volunteer force, and they reflect it. Their morale is high. They understand what they're doing. The re-enlistments are way above expectations and way above the targets. So that's a good reflection. One of the troops that we met there, riding in the C-130 right across from me, a young captain from in the Chicago area, she was just said it's just an honor to serve. Left a 2-year-old daughter at home and a husband at home. He's training to be a sheriff up in the Chicago area. But she reflects what I see. Our young people just feel like it's an honor to be there and an honor to serve. and it's a very, very important part. This is the Iraqi general that we met with. Also, Colonel Roberts, he is the backup for the Iraqi general. That's out in the Baghdad proper. He's in charge of the Haifa Street project, where they've cleaned up that tremendous haven for terrorists. So, just again, these are some of the positive signs that I saw out in Baghdad.
What about what the opinion of the American troops of their Iraqi counterparts? Do they see progress, or do they see what are the kinds of concerns they have? And obviously, there's terrific challenges when you're cooperating across different military traditions, different languages, different equipment and sophistication levels. A pretty tough job to ask the young soldiers to do.
It is, and basically, again, just like we were painting the picture before, that you've got spotty transitions, you have spotty opinions. If they're in an area where the Iraqis have not done very well, where the Iraqi commanders have not taken very good charge and control of their troops, they have a low opinion. But in the areas where the transitions are occurring, like there with Colonel Roberts, we met with several of the soldiers that were there in the briefing room, had a pretty high opinion because they could see the effects. So, as you would expect, we have different opinions from different people depending on what viewpoint they see Baghdad from. Overall, Baghdad, basically, I think there are 4 different transition points that our troops are having. They first want to disrupt, and then they want to have a conflict. Then they want to actually take control, and then they want to maintain control. And we've got about 8% of Baghdad that is now in the maintaining, that we've already, all we have to do is hold that area. We've already secured it. And we've got about 40% of Baghdad that's in the area that we actually have taken control of it. We've actually swept through the streets, cleaned the people out. So we're about the halfway point, about halfway through the surge. The surge is pretty strongly received there. Our soldiers think pretty highly of that. They're tired, there's no doubt about it. Many have pulled multiple tours. They're having to work a lot of hours every day, and always they're in harm's way. But again, I found a sense of optimism and a sense of purpose, and the continuing statement is, please don't pull us out before we're finished.
What do you see? We get caught up, obviously, and appropriately, in the very day-to-day tough challenges that our forces are facing, our diplomatic people are facing. Sometimes I think we don't step back and think about, okay, what's really at stake in Iraq? What are the big issues here? It's not a matter of just winning and losing here. How does this fit into the larger piece of stability and, more profoundly, American security? So again, from your standpoint, having been there multiple times, having your own background, when you're talking in your district, you're talking to other people, how do you describe the stakes in Iraq? What do you think the significance is in terms of the outcome for our country?
I believe what I heard in February when I went both to Israel and to Iraq, and the political leaders in both areas, and it was Olmert and Netanyahu both in Israel. In other words, the opposition and the majority party in Iraq. I heard the same message, that if the U.S. precipitously leaves Iraq, that Iraq will fall to Iran, and then just like dominoes, we'll have Syria will fall, Jordan, Egypt, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, all of the Middle East, everyone who's been somewhat friendly to us, the regimes will fall. They'll be taken over by some terrorist organization, and maybe even before any of those fall, Israel was going to fall. The Israeli leaders, both opposition and majority, both said, if you get out of Iraq, Israel will fall. It's that serious. To me, when I consider a world with the instability of the world oil market, because we get about 40% of the world's oil from there, the terrorists have said they will take oil off the market, that they will use that to disrupt us and to kill America, to annihilate Americans. They will disrupt our economy. I can envision where, if we get out, that the 4 or 5 year consequence will be economic chaos, economic worldwide depression, and political instability of a magnitude that none of us have ever imagined. That's what I tell my constituents.
Now, obviously, General Petraeus, recognizes the stakes are high. is one of the architects of the surges, so he's got a lot of faith in it. But he also talks in terms of a drawdown between at least now and next July. From your perspective, having been on the ground, is that prudent given the stakes that are there? Is that possible to achieve given the challenges we face?
You know, Tom, on that, I don't go enough and you don't go enough. We must take the opinion of the generals. If the generals think the war is lost and they say come home, that's when I'm going to listen. I think that this war on terrorists, this war against radical Islam is very important, but I'm going to take my cues from the general. If he says it's time to pull out, I may have different opinions, but I'm going to say, okay, then you put the force level where you need them. He sees it every day. He sees the big picture. I'm in 1 or 2 times a year. There's no way that I can make those evaluations, and so I always say that I'll just take the opinion of our generals.
How about, Ambassador Crocker hasn't gotten quite the same attention as General Petraeus did, maybe because he didn't have an ad run against him in the New York Times, but he's a pretty seasoned career diplomat. He's been our ambassador to Pakistan, 30 years in the diplomatic corps, recognized, frankly, under both Republican and Democratic administrations, as one of the premier American foreign policy practitioners in a real sense. Did you happen to catch any of his testimony, and how did you evaluate his view of the political possibilities for some sort of agreement in Iraq?
First of all, I've been fairly critical of our State Department, beginning with Paul Bremer. I think that we've made huge mistakes there. I listened to most of Ambassador Crocker's testimony and just quietly am waiting to see if he can push it forward. I think a lot of times that we get mixed signals from inside our State Department. There are those there who don't want to push an all-out military conflict. They began to pull back toward our forces. So I'm kind of watching to see what his role is going to be. I will tell you that we had some straightforward discussions with people in our embassy there, and it was the first really time of all the trips over there that we could begin getting answers. I've been frankly asking very straightforward questions about the accounting of our $28 billion that we've sent over there to reconstruct, some of the early decisions, and we had discussions that were not always comfortable, but they were always direct and they were always full of substance, and that's kind of the first. And so those early signs of his administration I'm pretty pleased with, but we'll hold our reservations. We'll reserve judgment until we see.
Well, I'll just throw in another observation here and say, having served on a committee with you on natural resources and as a classmate, yeah, I'm willing to testify. Your questions can be very direct, can put these guys in difficult, and that's what you're supposed to do.
That's our job.
That's oversight. We're there in many ways to ask the questions the American people want answered, but you are dealing almost all the time when you've got a witness or somebody you're talking to, somebody with a knowledge base that's bigger than yours.
Right.
And so how you get to the fact and get the question answered. And frankly, sometimes you give them the opportunity. The question you ask, let them say things that they might not think it'd be wise to say otherwise.
Yes, they're required to answer our questions, and we give them some amount of liberty if we'll ask the right questions and penetrate deeply enough. Again, oversight is one of our huge responsibilities, and I take that very seriously. Oversight of my own team, oversight of the other team. So we were in with a critical eye. Frankly, when I had the chance to go to Iraq the weekend just before Petraeus came to testify, we jumped at that opportunity. We had just gotten back from our August break. I'd come back from overseas and gotten in about 48 to 56 hours before we left and went back to Iraq, but we felt like the effort was worth it.
Did you have an opportunity to visit with any people from New Mexico while you were there, any soldiers?
Always we do. That's something that I always appreciate about our in-country hosts, and we got lunch with several New Mexicans. They were people that I had met with before, frankly, back in February. Again, strong opinions about the good things that are happening. I continue to hear the question, how come my parents don't see on the evening news the good things we're doing? They see on the evening news the bad things from Iraq, the fatalities and the casualties, but they don't see much of the good news. It frustrates our young men and women. Back in 2003, I took a video, about 5 hours of video. We made that into about a 45-minute CD. I show that in schools whenever I get the chance, and it shows just the positive things that kids are talking about we were able to do there as young men and women.
Yeah, that is such I hear the same theme when I go over, and I remember asking a young man once, actually we were on an aircraft carrier, on John F. Kennedy in the Gulf, and I said, tell me, and this guy had actually been on land as well, and I said, tell me, how does what you see compare to what you see on television? Because this is maybe the first war in our history where they literally can watch CNN and Fox, and you go into a mess hall in Baghdad, that stuff's available easily. So they see the war as we see it and as they live it simultaneously. And this guy was really pretty sophisticated. He said, what you see on television is accurate. It's just not complete.
Right.
And he said that's always the problem, because obviously an explosion or a firefight or something is a dramatic visual. But it's not very exciting to watch a school open or a parliament vote and operate and wrangle. And so you just have to remember there's a whole nother dimension that you just simply do not see because it's not as exciting. He said, I don't think it's even deliberate. I'm not saying somebody's trying to shade the news. That's not for me to say, but I'm telling you what I live is not, you see the dramatic moments that I live. You don't see the day-to-day life that I live or the progress that I think is being made day-to-day. It was quite compelling testimony.
That's one thing that our troops continue to mention, and it was true in 2003, it's true today, is that the Iraqi people had been told by Saddam Hussein that Americans were going to kill them. So they were pretty fearful, especially when we invaded. And to watch 3 kids from Albuquerque, New Mexico, who joined to go to Iraq, they joined a unit that was not headed there, so they got transferred to one in Utah that was headed. They all 3 came in to see me, or came there to see me when I was in Iraq, gave me a picture. But they were talking about the same things I'd seen overseas, that cautiously, people opening the curtains to see the American troops. Next week, they'd leave the window open. The next week, the door would be propped open. The next week, they'd stand in the door. And just that morning when I was there in Iraq, they told something that I had seen constantly over in Asia, is the kids had been brought out by their parents to see the Americans, and always they would want to touch the American's arm. A lot of Middle Easterners, a lot of Asians don't grow much hair on the arm, and so little kids they're amazed by the amount of hair. And when they were talking about that, it's the same thing that had happened to me in the Philippines, and the same thing had happened in Vietnam. And so you just say, okay, these kids are seeing life from a viewpoint that I've seen it, and know that they're telling me the truth, that the Iraqis are beginning to come out and get comfortable with them. So those are things that, the good things, like you're saying, that they can't be talked about or isn't talked about even on the evening news. But we're winning the hearts and minds of the people very gradually there to believe, contrary to what they've been taught their whole lives, that we're not there to kill them, that we're there to help them.
Do you think the Iraqis, how do they assess our willingness and our ability to stay as long as it may take? And we hear that, and Americans don't want to be there in the kind of numbers that we have indefinitely. Frankly, I think most Americans prefer not to be there at all. They're there primarily because they think it's important to our security, and honestly, you'd like to have the opportunity for democracy to take root in that part of the world. That could be a really a region-changing event if that could happen. How do you think they assess our staying power, our commitment to work with them to a successful solution?
I think that they probably see the evening news that you and I see, and they do have that in the back of their mind. Their risk is very high. Their risk is like the people in Vietnam who supported us. If we pull out like we did in Vietnam, people were killed just because they supported us in Vietnam. The same thing is going to happen, and that causes a very slow transition. You have to be very bold if you're paying with your life and the life of your family to come out and side with the Americans if you believe our resolve is not there. So I've heard pretty consistently on the 4 trips in, early on it was, don't leave before you kill Saddam Hussein, and don't leave before the job is finished. Of course, we've seen that Saddam Hussein has found justice, and now the perception is, or the request is, please don't leave before the job is done. Okay. And they don't want us to stay forever, but they also understand that we're bringing tremendous security to a region and to their lives where they've never seen it.
Yeah, that tension is very real. You feel it there. Let me ask you this, and I don't know if we've ever particularly talked about this, but it seems to me sometimes in our discussions about the war, we forget about who and what Saddam Hussein was. And there's almost a presumption that the region and the world would be better had he been left in power. What's your view of that? I mean, was the removal of Saddam Hussein, as some would suggest, a big mistake because it made the Iranians stronger and embroiled us in a tough and difficult conflict? Was it the right thing? Well, it's one of those interesting what-ifs, but it's something that I know I think about some. You must think about as well occasionally.
I don't have any doubt in my mind that the world is a better place without Saddam Hussein, and Iraq is a better place without Saddam Hussein. And yes, the Iranians are a big factor, but I will tell you that we just cannot in the world accept one leader who will brutally kill his own people, disrupt his own economy in order to keep himself in power. Iraq is one of the wealthiest of all nations. They don't just have oil there, but their oil economy was in shambles. They have the Tigris and Euphrates River come right together. The heart of civilization is right in Baghdad, and that entire agricultural civilization had been broken. He wouldn't even repair the irrigation pumps. So one of the first things that we did was go in and reestablish irrigation. I have no doubt in my mind that Saddam Hussein killed thousands and hundreds of thousands of his own people. I don't have any problem with the fact that he found justice.
What about, again, just briefly here in closing, tell me your assessment of the ability of the Iraqis, Sunni, Shia, and Kurd, to actually come together and learn to live with one another. I mean, you've got elements from outside the country, like the Iranians and other groups that are causing havoc, but at the end of the day, they've also got to learn to live with one another and hold those foreign elements in check.
I don't have enough context to know that. It's a question I try to answer for myself. On one of our visits, we were told that Sunnis were answering to Shia generals and Shias were answering to Sunni generals, that one sect had gone in and cleaned out a mosque of his sect. So we've been given examples. That, again, is General Field's top responsibility, to stop the sectarian violence, to stop them working against each other. We'll just have to see. I myself just don't have enough time over there in that culture to know.
I think that'll be the big open question. I don't think there's any question about the ability of our military people to do what we asked them to do. They've demonstrated that time and again. The question is, can the Iraqis step up and take advantage of the opportunity? And there's a lot at stake on that.
There is. And I saw some positive things. I heard some positive things on this trip in. But it's got to happen not just a week, a month, a year. This has got to be the long term where they're working together and relationships don't get disrupted.
Well, Congressman, we're just about out of time, but I want to thank you for coming out today to join us on the show. I appreciate very much your service in the United States House of Representatives and to our country. There's no question that the next several months in Iraq are going to be critically important for all of us. We've heard today from Congressman Pearce. As a nation, we heard earlier from General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker. We're making real progress in Iraq, but we've got to remain diligent. We've got to finish the job, and our military and elected Iraqi leaders deserve the necessary time to effectively establish stability in Iraq. So I think our folks have done a tremendous job, laid out a prudent plan, and I think they can get to that goal. As Congress continues to debate these issues, rest assured that I'll be providing the residents of the 4th District with the latest updates on the situation in Iraq. I hope you've enjoyed this particular episode of Cole on Congress. Until next time, this is Congressman Tom Cole. And Steve, thanks for being here.